In this week's political news, former President Jacob Zuma has reportedly asked the High Court in Pietermaritzburg to acquit him of all charges in his arms deal corruption case. And former Gauteng MEC of Health, Dr. Bandile Masuku, and suspended presidential spokesperson Khusela Diko have successfully appealed their suspensions as Gauteng ANC PEC members. This means that they can resume their duties as PEC members. To discuss these developments further, we are joined by political analyst Professor Barry Hanyane. Professor Hanyane, a very good morning. Thank you for speaking to us. Jacob Zuma, once again, 16 cases that he's got to account for, several witnesses, in fact, 217 witnesses lined up by the NPA, but he's asked the NPA chief prosecutor to recuse himself.
Hugo, good morning. Good morning to your viewers. Look, I think it plays out to the narrative that the former president would by all means want to continue employing what is now known as your Stalingrad tactics. I think he is aware of the fact that the prosecutor in this case, Downing SC, has had a lot of time to prepare for this case. And of course, he is no stranger to political cases of this magnitude. And so the fear on Zuma's side is that indeed the state has a compelling case, and the only way to frustrate the state's approach and, of course, willingness to prosecute is by just asking the court that Mr. Downer should recuse himself, which perhaps would be the first issue to deal with come the 26th of May. But I'm of the opinion that the court might not necessarily accede to such a request, and we are more likely to see the court case resuming.
Now, where would that leave Jacob Zuma?
Well, I think his defense lawyers must actually prepare for this case. They have no choice. I think at last, after so many years of delaying, this case is likely to proceed. And it's in the interest of Mr. Zuma that his defense lawyers are actually ready to present a case. Let's not forget that in the dock here, there's the French company Thales, who have already conceded to the position that they are ready to proceed with the case. And so the court, I don't think the court would rather be favorable to Mr. Zuma and not necessarily treat Thales much the same. So that's the other dilemma that I suppose this case has to offer.
Now, we know that this is, I think, third or fourth legal team to represent Jacob Zuma. Does that prejudice or disadvantage him in any way, do you think?
Well, in a sense, one can take a rather blatant approach and say, perhaps he brought this to himself. He was given enough time to prepare, and in the 11th hour prior to the previous appearance, we were informed that he has severed relations with the previous defense team. So that in itself may very well be viewed by the court as some kind of a self-inflicted, if you want to call it that way, a self-inflicted decision that he took, knowing the risks involved. So in this instance, I think the court will be less lenient in saying you have a new defense team, therefore there is ample time that must be allocated. Surely we can all agree that it has taken too long for this case to proceed, and indeed the hour has arrived.
Professor, I've followed many cases where the prosecutor would have 5, 6, maybe even a dozen witnesses, but 217 witnesses. Surely the former president is quaking in his boots right now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And at that, you have people like Patricia DeLille and others who have at their disposal received credible information that can be submitted as evidence to court. So yes, this is a serious battle for the former president, I'm trying to figure it out without necessarily being an expert in this field to say, does he have the mettle to actually defend himself? And I'm struggling to apportion that kind of opportunity. I think this is his biggest battle from a legal point of view ever to have been confronted with.
Now I'm going to read excerpts here where the NDC recommends that all PEC members, including Masuku and Diko, be schooled about ethics and moral conduct and the ANC constitution. Obviously, we're talking about Khusela Diko and the fact that she's been acquitted and Mr. Masuku now able to resume their roles in the party. What does this say about the ANC and current issues that it's going through?
Hugo, we've highlighted the fault lines before. What this says is that too long the ANC has been relaxed in terms of ensuring that ethical guidelines and behavior by extension are a priority for the party. And seemingly this phase of wanting to implement the step-aside resolution is a serious wake-up call. A wake-up call that unfortunately found the governing party not necessarily ready to implement the resolution itself. I've always questioned the template of implementation. Already we are starting to see cracks between what could be interpreted legally and lawfully by the National Disciplinary Committee versus what provincial disciplinary committees are capable of doing. So in a sense, it also reflects the bankruptcy within the party in saying we have the capacity to ensure that ethical guidelines and behavior by extension, once again, are upheld. And this goes beyond the national, but also it's embraced by the different provincial DC structures. Further to that, I think there's a struggle within the ANC to be able to define exactly what do we mean by corruption. Look at the case of Madam Diko, whose I suppose mistake was not to declare interest. Could this then be seen as an act of corruption? The ANC must be in a position to define that for themselves.
Now, following the acquittal of both individuals who previously held positions in government, what happens? Are they able, should they be reinstated?
I think for Dr. Masuku, it's going to be difficult because remember, his position was more political rather than being a full-time salaried employee. As for Madame Diko, I think the Office of the Presidency must then finalize the internal disciplinary processes. But let's not forget, on both occasions, the SIU needs to complete their investigations further. Could there be the uncovering of further implicating evidence? We'll have to wait and see on that. But then again, this proves that the two cases from the onset would have been difficult to actually deal with from the side of the governing party.
Now, Diko launched a scathing attack on Provincial Secretary Jacob Zuma, accusing him of dishonesty and trying to destroy her political career. Does this confirm those assertions? Is this just another case of factionalism and infighting that we are witnessing in the ANC?
Hugo, we've known for a very long time that within the ANC, people tend to hold grudges against each other. The analogy here is that people will have your so-called yellow cards and red cards in a situation where, for instance, your nemesis within the party would feel that it's time to actually expose you or be dealt with. Both cards, depending on the severity of the circumstances, would then have to be produced, as is the case in any sporting field of play. So the same applies here in the ANC. People do have grudges And this, unfortunately, has been the culture and has been institutionalized informally for quite some time in the governing party. The governing party has a lot to do in this instance, making sure that indeed the party is rebuilt on lines that encourage some kind of consensus, some kind of allegiance to the party and not to people. Because once you expose the latter part, then it's easy for party officials to actually air their squabbles and, of course, fight amongst each other, which does not augur well in terms of ensuring that the party is on the path of renewal and strengthening its position in our polity.
Now, one of the things that the ANC would certainly like to do is have the buy-in or the support of the public, who are a large percentage of their voters. But you have the SIU, which finds their own membership guilty. Then you have the ANC Integrity Commission absolving the same individuals.
Yeah, well, in this case, as I said earlier on, I think the party now must really seriously sit down and define for itself what is the meaning of corruption, right? Already, if you read the report as produced by Madame Oliphant, who said on both cases, you actually struggle to establish whether the ANC has consensus on defining what exactly is corruption. In the case of Diko, as I've mentioned before, does the issue of lack of actually processing the idea of declaring interest also falling within the basket of corruption? If that is the case, then it must apply universally. The second issue, and I'm glad the report does speak to it, is that there is no synergy between the ANC's own constitution with that of the country in certain aspects, especially aspects that deals with issues of promoting good ethical conduct. And as I said earlier, the ANC has a mammoth task ahead in terms of rebuilding itself. One of the things is to make sure that there is that synergy between its constitution as well as that of the country. For instance, if you look at the debate advanced by the suspended SG, he is pointing to that anomaly, that as much as he may be suspended and needs to abide by the step-aside resolution, there is incongruence of a sort between resolutions, between the ANC constitution, as well as the country's constitution. And once those bridges are built well, we are likely to see the ANC somewhat implementing some of its resolutions like the step aside in a very impartial manner.
Before you go, Professor Hanyane, you brought up the issue of the suspended Secretary General. He's been quiet for a few days, which is unlike him, certainly in the most recent past. Can we expect another move?
I don't think so, Hugo. I think this is the last straw to break the camel's back. He has little options, really, and it doesn't take a legal expert to actually arrive at that analysis. However, he still has to face, once again, the ANC's NEC, and might take a different attitude and a view to his recent behavior. Who knows that they might extend the suspension? Who knows that they might put his own membership at a risky position, which I don't think he would pretty much like to experience. So in a sense, he is in a very tight corner, and I think the silence also speaks to the issue that already the matter is sub judice, based on the fact that he chose the courts of law rather than dealing with his issues internally. And this is the person who, at some stage, made public pronouncements about such actions not to be encouraged by ANC members. And then he turns around and he seeks relief from the court of law. We'll have to watch this one very closely.
Political analyst Professor Barry Hanyane, always great to pick your brain. Thank you for stopping by.